I'm Connor, that rum drinker, and welcome to Beyond the Cask, the podcast where we explore rum and the culture, stories, and history of the people who drink it. In today's show, I'm excited to welcome a special guest for the first time as we take our conversation global. Today's guest is a fellow rum enthusiast based all the way down under in Australia, and we're going to be talking about the rum scene in Australia, attending rum shows, making friends, and his top picks. So without further ado, let me introduce Chris, Rum Rumble. Chris, it's great to have you on as the first guest on Beyond the Cask. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Connor. It is amazing to finally be on a podcast like this. I've been watching podcasts forever. That's a whole thing these days. Most especially the Rumcast. I think that's probably been the podcast to listen to the most
100%.
religiously. So
Yeah,
to finally be talking about rum on a podcast, amazing.
I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get invited on, so I'm just going to start my own, and then that solves that need.
That's so
Um,
exciting. Yeah.
yeah, so it's good fun. I'm really looking forward to it. So, I guess why don't you start by introducing yourself to the listeners, all 20 of them, or however many I've got at this point, who haven't come across you before.
All right. So, as you introduced me before, my name's Chris. I run a Instagram page and a little bit of a YouTube channel called the Rum Rumble. It's got a big focus on Australian rums and cocktail recipes I put together. Bit dormant for the time being since my move to Melbourne, but it has been a passion project of mine. Rum's been a big hobby of mine for the past couple of years since the COVID lockdowns, when I think the
Classic.
two of us would have met through a mutual YouTube group, perhaps. But
Yeah.
I don't know if we're allowed to name it
Yeah,
or
no,
not.
go for it. Go for it. Let's
Yeah,
have that conversation for sure.
that would be a whole conversation, wouldn't it? But no, I'd be remiss to say that it wasn't Steve the Bartender's YouTube channel who really got me into drinking rum. Although it wasn't the first spirit category I was interested in. But it was definitely, after discovering him during the lockdowns, I was like, this stuff seems sick. This is really cool. And I joined his Discord server and I met you and everybody else in the bunch there.
There has to be like big shout out to like Steve the Barman. Like he created this entry to rum and still has, for beginners. It's that entry to the category that really did, like you said, it like just turbocharged my interest. It really like added fuel to that. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
great. And like you said, how we met and all of that.
Yeah. And it's great that the community is still going strong together. They're still doing taste-alongs and everyone's still
Exactly.
chatting in there. It's great. It is a community.
And that's what I think rum is. It's not just a spirit, like, you know, not to like downplay and speak badly of other spirits, but rum is that spirit that just feels like it fosters great culture and great communities, and it's nice that it's done that for us. So
I'm
I'm not sure you could have a tradition this early on. Episode whatever, like it's quite early to have a tradition, but we're going to
Oh, but
ignore
you've got to
that.
set them early on, right?
Exactly. So we're going to create a tradition. I tried to do it in the pilot,
Amazing.
but like, going to do that going forward. So we've each got a glass of rum that we can do a
We
bit of a
do.
virtual cheers with. It's 9 p.m. ish for you,
It
but it's
is.
midday for me. Bit of a time zone difference. So I figured, I'm going to keep the ABV a little lower if I'm going to make it through to like dinner this evening. So I've gone for the Brugal 1888.
Ooh.
Nice, just nice, easy. It's a just a great and easy sipper when I don't want anything too challenging. And I think it's got a great amount of flavor for like a 40% lower ABV. So yeah, so that's what I'm drinking. But what's in your glass? What are you drinking today?
So I was pretty pressed for choices, but I landed on something that was going to be familiar to the international audience because I'm obviously not British or anywhere from the UK, such as yourself. I live in Australia. So I picked the Dead Reckoning Killick release that Justin Bosley did last year. And I was super excited when Justin told me he was doing this. Even though it wasn't it's not a proper release for Australia. Don't let the ATO hear this. This is sort of like an illegal bottling, which we could go on forever. See how it says rum on the label? It can't do that because it's unaged. We've got that minimum age requirement. This is a bottle for the US. I hope he doesn't get angry at me saying these things. He left a couple of bottles in Australia. But since it's familiar to the international audience, I thought, why not start with it? Since those have been all exported recently to some good reviews I've been seeing, which is great. I'm glad people are enjoying some Australian rum around the world, especially since most of it doesn't leave here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's not one I've had before, so I mean, I need to. But I also didn't know about the rule on the age for Australia. So that's interesting.
That's a whole conversation in itself. Whenever an Australian person has gone on the Rumcast, they've had this discussion. This is a rule that's been around for a very long time in Australia. I don't want to throw out a number and give the wrong one off the top of my head, but for a long time, all your classically aged spirits, so rum, whiskey, brandy, they have a minimum age requirement of 2 years, in wood specifically, the law says, I think, before you could call them brandy, whiskey, or rum. Yeah. So it's created a bit of a ruffling amongst Australian distillers' feathers that they can't make these younger rums or unaged rums and put rum on the label. Some people have very cleverly gotten around it by using rum in the brand name, so they can put rum in big words on the bottle. That's one way of getting around it.
I mean, it makes so much sense because I know that we see the same thing with spice rum and liqueurs is a thing. Like, again, very big conversation when we start moving into the terms of like spirit drink and using terms like that and rum based and those kind of terminologies. So I guess you've got that kind of balance between transparency, but then also like that consumers need to have an idea of what it is, but they don't, like, not every consumer is going to be quite as hesitant to call us geeks, nerds, rum nerds, where we are more informed than the average rum drinker. Maybe not the most informed, at least speaking for myself. And so you want that level of transparency, but also like give me some idea of what to expect. Like what am I drinking?
Of course. And I mean, I've seen that even in brands that are only being sold, or primarily, I should say, have international desire from a really invested, geeky community. And they're just like, it's a rum, right?
100%. So you have the Dead Reckoning Killick. Is that like is that the kind of your typical style of rum that you go for? Is there a country that you typically prefer? An ABV? Is it, cane juice, molasses? What do you like? What's rum for you?
I mean, I am so grateful to have a collection with, quite a diversity of things in it, but I would say most of all love my heavy-bodied kinds of rums, oftentimes pot stills, big flavors. They don't have to be matured for very long. Of course, this Killick is unaged completely, which I was about to think you should get G to send you a sample. He'll hook you up.
There we go.
I'm sure. Yeah, something big, bold, with a lot of complexity in it. The sort of thing that I can smell and immediately be like, oh, this is really interesting, and I could spend some time taking it apart.
So a challenging sipper.
I really like it, yeah, and I like giving it to my partner or my friends and seeing what they get out of it, because with some funky rums it can be just a storm of noise and smells, and I might get one thing and they might get something completely different, and I think that's another big fun part of rum.
Yeah, I mean, I love the fact that we will all have completely different tasting notes, and I think you do see that more when you're like looking at people from different countries. There are foods, flavors, things that I'll have that you haven't, and vice versa. And so we'll instantly be describing things differently just because of our own experience. And sometimes it just sounds completely wrong. I'm like, no, have you ever had this? You're like, no, I haven't. I'm just going based on what I think it might be like. And yeah, I think it's crazy because when you take it apart, that individual thing, and you start breaking it apart, you might be like, oh, okay, so we are getting the same thing. We're just looking at it slightly differently. But yeah, it's crazy because your palate will also, as you develop, I'm getting notes now that I never would have got before, and also enjoying notes that I would have not even understood before.
Yeah, I can strongly relate to that. I mean, revisiting rums I bought at the start of my rum journey, or even just things, you haven't tasted in some time, they just like I don't remember it being like this whatsoever, and maybe you appreciate it differently, or maybe it's like, I don't know why I bought this.
I have
it's
a
fun
few
to
of
have
those.
that experience. Yeah.
So
Couple little old spice bottles lying around.
yeah, was right. So one to just not quite a curveball, but your rum collection. How many bottles are we talking? How quickly has that grown for you?
Oh yeah, people always look at me with concern, like my friends of mine, when I tell them. So I think if we're counting full-sized bottles, it's probably getting close to 100. But I've got like a whole bunch of samplers lying around here and there. So
I love the fact that you do the same distinction because I don't count the samples because if I do, people think I've got more of a problem.
yeah,
So I passed the 100 bottle mark a couple of weeks ago now, and even that felt a bit of a lie because I was like, well, that's just I've currently got 100 bottles. I've got like 40, 50 empties in the past, but we're not counting those towards the 100.
you just got to downplay it.
So yes, I'm like, I've hit my 100th bottle based on the fact that I've got 100 going. And then, I think like you, I think I've got maybe 80, 90 samples all in a drawer that that I've either like done half of them and I want to revisit or I've not opened yet. And yeah, there's a fair few samples to get through.
Are a lot of those samples coming from the Discord communities?
Yeah, so I think you know, I think it's nice. I'm fortunate having like the Instagram and the blog that um like there's some brands that are sending me samples. Really fortunate that Bristol Classic Spirits, um, independent bottler, have drammed me up a lot of the range, and so I've been able to sit down with like a Caroni and Jamaican from the Clarendon and this Enmore 30-year-old rum, and I'm really fortunate that my Instagram, my content that people have found interesting, which I never intended. I was just doing it for me. I used to be a photographer, and post lockdown, I was like, I just need to. I had like an itchy trigger finger. I was like, I need to start taking some more photos, and I think that lasted for about 4 photos. So my first few posts, there was like my first post was a Chairman's Reserve Spice. I spoke about that in the pilot, and that photo was really creative. And then it was the Diplomatico Reserva Exclusiva, the green bottle. That was again a really creative photo. And then from there, I was like, I actually really enjoyed just talking about the rum and the photography. I was like, oh, that's hobby in the past now. I still do it on
Yeah,
occasion,
it served its purpose.
but I was like, if I hadn't been a photographer, I wouldn't have discovered rum. And if I hadn't been a photographer, I wouldn't have posted on Instagram. And then I kind of was like, right, the photographer thing could park over there. I really just want to talk about rum. And then from there, I mean, I went from 2 bottles to 20 to 70 to over 100, like overnight, it feels
Straight into the
like.
deep end. Yeah, it does feel like, oh my goodness, where on earth have all these come from? It,
I know,
I'll
and
go through
like,
like my phone camera roll every now and again, and I see photos from like back when I was beginning the collection, back when it was 10 bottles, and I'm like, oh goodness.
a fun one if you want to try. I've got an iPhone, and on the camera roll, if you just search the word rum, it tells you how many photos you've got for it. So I've just done it, and I've got 2,094 photos that have come up under the word rum,
Incredible.
which is
I mean, I
quite
got
a few.
300. Wow. There you
Yeah,
go. That is an astonishing amount of rum
I
photos.
take a lot of photos apparently. So yeah, so that might need to be a segment in future kind of guest shows where I just how many photos have you got
Can you beat
tagged with
Connor's
rum?
number?
2094 to beat and counting.
Got to keep it up.
Um,
Keep you leading.
yeah, I mean have to. I mean right. So let's dive into the main body of the show. I created Beyond the Cask to highlight the inclusivity of rum as a spirit and how it brings people of different cultures together. And, we're a great example of that. We met, obviously, as we said, through Steve the Barman's YouTube, then onto a Discord server, and we've got that shared interest. And, there's a lot of us in those groups who we have all got at least two commonalities. We are human and we like rum. And the rest kind of doesn't matter, and at the same time matters a hell of a lot, because it doesn't matter that we don't have those other things in common, but we've got that thing where rum has brought us together, and then we learn from each other and we start becoming this like sum of our shared experiences. And I mean, we live about 9,000 miles apart, and we've not met in person, and now we're sat chatting on, be it very new, but on a rum podcast. And that's crazy.
Yeah.
Like, it's mad.
It's incredible. It's incredible that things can change like that. It's great. And the people you can meet along the way, I'm sure we could both wax lyrical about people in our journeys through rum who have been great.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I couldn't agree more. We've touched on how we met, but I'd love to circle back to your rum journey. So how you got into rum. You mentioned COVID, a pretty big milestone, I think, in most rum influencers, rum bloggers, home bar people, like, a good time for anyone. But, I think it's nice that some good has come out of it. I think people reassessed hobbies and interests and discovered new things. So yeah, like, how was your, like, tell me about your rum journey, I guess.
Yeah, well, I suppose the journey starts prior to COVID, a couple of years prior, back when I was a wee bab, which I suppose wasn't long ago. So I got my first job when I was 15, and it was working in a cafe and bar nearby, back where I lived in Sydney. And this bar was quite unique because it served nearly exclusively Australian gins. Now, of course, the gin boom, big thing all around the world. You guys in the UK, you had an enormous boom in gin brands and distilleries popping up. And of course, it's in a bit of a slump at the moment. And Australia followed suit, but of course we were a couple of years behind, as we usually are, to everything. And this cafe and bar I was working at was basically at the forefront of the gin boom in Australia. Anytime there were new products on the market, the owner, wonderful lady, she would bring them in. She'd bring in the distillers. She'd do these tasting nights with people. She'd do different flights every day of the week, all showcasing how cool gin was. And so even though I was 15, I was being brought up around this environment, and I was eventually meeting distillers and, learning all about how gin was made, what they were doing, why it's different, why Australian gin is different, all the native and unique flavors that go into it from Australia. And, and that has blown out now. Like, Australian gin is now, I think, I would say, reasonably well favoured on the world stage, especially some of the big brands. Four Pillars is, of course, I think, our biggest domestic export. And so, yeah, that's where my passion for spirits, and not just drinking the spirits, but for the knowledge behind them, the people behind
Those conversations.
The conversation, why XYZ is unique compared to ABC. And of course, there's always the banter that goes on, like, our gin's the best because, well, we made it, and not those other guys.
So it's such a strong argument, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ours is better because it sells, like, and we do this, and it's
our label's cooler.
Yeah, there's always a reason, and I love that. I think there's so much friendly competition. Yes, we've got this thing we portray, we're all competitors with this, but like, I don't know about Australia specifically, but I know that obviously the UK rum scene, taking that, is so friendly, welcoming, and it's great to see so many of the UK distilleries helping each other out, like learning from each other, having conversations. And after some of the shows, like, you see them all just having a drink together and trying each other's stuff. Like, there's genuinely that friendly competition as opposed to like any animosity.
Yeah, I mean, I'll flag that because there's a great Australian example of that in rum, which I can mention shortly. But to continue, this all gave me the exposure and this interest in gin, especially Australian gin. And so I learned a lot about it for a couple of years, and I was immersed in it, and so on and so on. And then eventually I turned 18, and I moved out of home. I went to Hobart in Tasmania, and I figured, and this was so, and I figured to build myself a little home bar. 18 years old, living away from home. Right, exactly. And so I went shopping around for a couple of well, for a couple of bottles, right? I needed my spirits, I need my vodka, my tequila, my whiskey, my gin, my rum, and I came to the rum part, and I'm in the bottle shop, and I'm thinking, I've had Bacardi before, I could get Bacardi, but I'd like to try something different for a white rum to go into cocktails and so on. And so I asked the guy behind the counter, and he's like, "Give this a try. Something a bit different, a bit similar, but better. Similar but better." And the rum that he gave me was stolen white rum, which I've actually got a YouTube video on, I think, and I will recommend it time and time again because it's pretty a one-note sipping rum, but if you mix it into a daiquiri, I'll wax lyrical about how it still makes the best daiquiri I've ever tried, and it's really unassuming. It's a small label IB from I think New Zealand, and I think it's 2 years old, but then filtered Trinidad rum, and it's only 37% ABV. So it's really unassuming, but I am dead set in saying it makes an outstanding daiquiri. And then from there, I mean, I fell in love with that rum, and I used it up, and then I went to go find another one, and so I went, okay, go to the bottle shop, see what they've got, and the next white rum that caught my eye was something called Bean Lee, I think 2 or 3 year old white rum. I didn't know much about it at the time. I could say a bit more about it nowadays. And then after that, it was just a matter of me buying more and more rums, just trying different things here, there, and everywhere. And it was totally uninformed. It was like, I like the label. The name sounds cool. Somebody at the store recommends it. And so, like, a lot of it were spiced rums and smaller brands, I wouldn't be able to find again.
I think there's something nice in that, though, isn't there? Like, when you go in uninformed, you kind of get to leave that bias. So I think you've already got a different, like, also better. You've got a better mentality than a lot of people because you went in and you were like, I'm going to try something new, and now I'm going to do it again and keep doing that.
Yeah.
So I love that humble
I
beginnings.
almost miss being able to do that, right? Like walking into a bottle shop and scorning this brand or the other, or just like not even like just passing by it, because I mean I know who makes that brand, and I probably won't like it, and it's probably got X, Y, and Z in it, and
oftentimes you're
I'm sure you
wrong.
understand. Yeah.
Like, there's definitely been bottles I've overlooked in my thing, and I'm trying to get better at leaving some of those biases at the door when I walk into a spirit shop or go online, because you can easily just make a bit of a judgment. You're like, oh, the label looks a bit too colourful and fun. It's probably not good, and you're like, oh, how wrong I was. I should have tried this years ago. It's so good. I really, really wish I'd been drinking this a lot longer.
Yeah, it's funny how things like that can just sit under our noses because for one reason or another, we scorn them off.
So sorry, back to your home bar.
Yeah, so at this time, I was still pretty big into gin. That was still my predominant interest. Down in Tasmania, there are lots of very good gin distilleries down there, and I was enjoying them. They were great. And then I moved back home to Sydney, and this was when I discovered Steve the Bartender's YouTube channel. So in the 2021 lockdown, and I live close to a pretty big bottle shop, and every now and again I'd buy a bottle of gin, something new. But eventually I'm watching Steve's videos and he's explaining the Smuggler's Cove things, and I'd previously had great rum cocktails in the past, so I was predominantly buying different rums to go into these cocktails just to make them that bit better. Buying a column still rum to go into a daiquiri, or something heavier to go into something else. And then from there, one thing led to another, and it just absolutely spiraled out of control because he went from, as it does, because he very quickly went from cocktail rums to getting into the entries of sipping stuff, and then I, like everyone else in the Discord server, just went headfirst, dove into, the $300 20-year this, that, and the others from all over the world.
That's one thing I've loved, because I think that you've got the whole thing of price point, because most people will start on the lower value as you'd expect. When I was first buying rums, £25 would have been a pretty normal price point. I'd have then jumped up and then gone 40 feels like the next point. And when I'm buying my £40 rums, £60-70 feels very high. And that's just kept going up and up. And now if I spend a couple of hundreds on a bottle of rum, it's fine. I'm thinking of treating
Yeah.
myself to a bottle of Black Tot Last Consignment. That's £1,000. That's £1,000.
It's the
And that just like, considering I've only been doing rum 5 years and my Instagram's been 2.5, 3, in that time I have gone from £40, well, £30 bottles of rum to the point where I'm about to buy £1,000 bottle. Uh, month before I tried Angostura Zenith. That's £3,000 a bottle. Quite. I'd love to have the disposable income. I'm saying this £1,000 purchase like it's a common occurrence. It's not. It's very much like, okay, well, the housing market's not great. I'm not going to be able to buy a house for a while anyway, so I might as well treat myself to a bottle of rum. So um, so you've got that. But I think our rum journey isn't just us, is it? It's like you said, like having Steve the Bomb and having his guidance, having the Discord and our friends, and even people when you go into the spirit shop and you're like, what can you recommend? Like having a good conversation with someone that does like the spirit. How I feel like I know the answer, but how has making rum friends impacted your rum journey?
I mean, I think that's been probably the biggest thing that's kept me going. I mean, every bottle I've got. It's great. It's delicious and it's fun to drink and it's fun to share around with my regular friends in person. But having communities, especially online, because that's where most of the community, it just creates, this board where everyone can geek out about this totally niche interest that we all have, and we can all throw up the bottles that we're trying, and people can ask questions and try and get insights from across the globe to something they may never try, and we can all gush about why this is great and this is bad and this is different to what you expected, and I think watching everybody do their own thing and have their own fun with it is great.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I think
that's been a big part of it, I think.
I think one thing I've really enjoyed about the communities is when you start getting to know people, there's certain people who, if they say they don't like a rum, I'll probably go out and buy it. And vice versa. If I start raving about something or say that I really dislike it, they will make a purchase based on that and not necessarily in agreement with me. Because we get to the point where traditionally I prefer a Spanish, then an English style of rum, as opposed to cane juice and agricole. I like my high ABV, but that's not a deal breaker. So you get those things. And so you start to build this like profile characteristic of Connor. And you're like, okay, so really very much like my Cuban, my Venezuelan, Dominican Republic. I love my black top. And so you've got that. And then you go, okay, so if I'm not liking this, there's probably because of this factor. So I have really enjoyed the fact that you don't even have to have something good said. Just by having a conversation, you're like, okay, I'm probably gonna like that.
Yeah, even when somebody else emphatically doesn't.
Yeah. And my favorite conversations are where you've got two very polar kind of opinions, and you're like, okay, well, you can't both be right. And that's the thing, you can both be right. And that's what I love because it is such a unique, all of our journey is unique, but it's a shared journey at the same time. And I think that it just makes it nice and special.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of the great fun of it. And I think the other big bit of fun I've had with it is getting my regular everyday friends to try my rum, especially sort of the wacky and out there stuff. Because I'll go to a party or I'll host a party, say here in my apartment, and I've got this wall of 20 something bottles of rum above me. And people know, oh, Chris, Charlie, he's the rum guy. He'll put something funny in you. And so people come around. They're like, I want to try something funny, and I'll be like, okay, let's see if you like it or not. And sometimes it really works, and they have a great time with it. Or you get a whiskey drinker, somebody who's accustomed to having spirits neat, and you slowly but surely you get the worm in their mind that no, rum is better. My dad
And you
has
get
been
to
the big one for me.
you've successfully converted.
I think completely. I think completely. Like anytime I go back home, he's like, "Let's bring out the rum, Chris." And I say,
That's
I mean,
brilliant.
most of my rum is still back home in Sydney, and I just say, if you want it, just go have it.
Love that. My friend's a gin drinker, and I'm not. Just gin's not a spirit for me. And
No,
I
the
go
the
down.
pine needle turpentine isn't.
Yeah, I, I'll, I mean, I'm not the biggest agricole fan. Agricole is 1,000 times more preferable to a gin for me than my Spanish English style. They're 10,000 times more preferable than that. So it's quite a scale. But I'll go down and I'll drive down. It's a couple of hour drive, and I'll load the car up with somewhere between 6 and 10 bottles of rum every time. Always a different combination, and I'll take them down, and we'll just kind of have a bit of a tasting session, or I'll make some cocktails, and I'll always bring something different. It's like, oh, I really like that one last time. I was like, I know, we're doing this time.
Try something
Or
else.
like, and there'll be the odd prank. I put a couple in there that I know are challenging because I might find them challenging. I brought down a sample of one that was just too much for me. It was um, an unaged agricole at like 70% ABV that um, blew my eyebrows off. I was like, I have no eyebrows and I've grown a lot more chest hair. And so I was like, oh, you have to try this. It's really interesting. And I was so surprised because he loved it and hadn't enjoyed so many others. But I think it had just held enough interest. It had that complexity. And I guess being the gin drinker he was, he'd found something in it that was really approachable. And yeah, my prank backfired and learned something new about him. I was like, okay,
You showed him the
let's let's
magic.
let's keep trying this. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's it's
I can
brilliant.
recall a time where I went to a party and I had a bottle of the Stroh 80% rum from Austria,
Okay.
and people were like, "Oh no, Charlie's got the Charlie's got the weaponized rum," and I'm handing out like little capfuls for everybody to try. And I think every second person was like, "That's incredible!" They were like, "What the heck?" They're like, "It's spicy, but the flavor's in there," and I'm like, "Yeah, that's why rum is always just a good surprise to people." I would say.
Yeah, I think that's why, like, we do it on this small scale when we host or we go to parties, but that's the beauty of the rum shows and the rum festivals for me as well, is you go around and you've got you've got people that want to check out the big brands, or they want to check out the brands they love to see what's new, because it's a chance to try before you buy and those things. I normally try, especially on the 2 day ones. I'll do a day where I go to all of the brands I already know and love, and I'm like, oh, what have you got new? What's under the table? Tried some stuff that's not been released and it won't be released for a year, and you know, been asked my feedback and opinion a couple of times, and I'm like, don't listen to me. Like I was like, I feel bad because I'm influencing, and I've got some opinions. I probably I'm better than I think I am. I've been doing it for a while, but yeah, I'm like you know more than me. Just go with your gut. But I don't. But I think it could do in another 6 months. Very very conflicting statements. I'm like, I don't know what 6 months will do, but just a little bit more age always. But so I do that, and then I try and, like, the other day, go to these stands I don't know, or I'll see like various people at the show attending, and I'm like, what do I need to go to? What has interested you? What's excited you? What stall do I have to go check out? And you go over and try something you've never had before. Um, and yeah, I think that's exciting.
Yeah, yeah. Find those hidden gems again that you wouldn't otherwise have gone near.
So on the rum show, not I've not been to Australia. It is on the list. Need to. Um,
Do
I mean,
visit.
if you could get rid of the spiders, it would be fantastic.
Oh, that's part of the
Um,
fun.
it's not. You will see me run faster. I don't like running. I like rumming, and yeah, I will run fast. But enough of the spiders. What's the rum scene like in Australia? Have we got rum shows over there? What's the kind of the bars? What's
So
it like?
I could go on quite the rant about this because I
Please
am
do.
a dedicated cynic to it for the time being. There are rum shows in Australia, though I've been to none of them. Um, because for the longest time I was caught in between them. So I used to live in Sydney, and there's one rum show in Brisbane called the Rum Revolution, and one in Victoria in Melbourne called Heart Rum. And so I was caught in between them. I unfortunately never made it to either of them when they were on. And now I'm in Melbourne. I Heart Rum has been postponed for a while, so unfortunately I've not been to it yet. And then, as I've left Sydney, they've just started a Sydney Rum Festival. They did a little trial version of it this year, which I missed. So I'm dancing in between all the fun. I did get to go to one like rum adjacent festivals actually over in the UK when I visited in 22. I went to
Awesome.
Imbibe Live.
Yes.
Steve managed to sneak me into that. There's a good photo of us all together there. And that was great fun. I got to try so many brands that had basically, UK brands, but also brands that had no presence in Australia, because there's a lot of those. And when I say I'm a cynic about it, it has to do with the fact that just like gin, where we were behind the gin revival for many years, we are very much behind the rum revival. Although that's changing, which is fantastic, and I always love to see gin distilleries converting to rum distilleries as opposed to whiskey distilleries, because that's, I won't say it's boring, but
Been there,
be
done
different.
that.
Yeah, right. So it's really exciting to see that, and I love trying new distilleries when they pop out stuff, or even like distilleries that aren't converted from gin distilleries that are solely dedicated. They started because they want to make rum. I think that's where the real passion can be found in what they're making. But yeah, we're very behind. The uptick in rum distilleries is quite recent, although it's been quick. I think we're now at 70 or 80 distilleries producing rum, which is quite amazing. Albeit,
I mean, I don't want to say it, but that feels like it might be more than the whole of the Caribbean. I feel like I've seen a number, because the individual countries don't have a lot anymore. I think Jamaica used to have in the hundreds, going down. I mean, I think it was, if I remember correctly, 300-400 distilleries going back, 1800s. But when we look modern day, we've got 4, 5 in Jamaica now. Cuba's got 3 that I can think of. Trinidad's only got one. Yeah. Trinidad, Ghana have got the 1 each. So when you look at it that way, I know the UK has more than the Caribbean from something I saw. So it sounds like you're trumping us. So it's quite a few.
Certainly the Caribbean distilleries punch well above their weight. Well, they lack in number, they definitely make up for in size and quality. Hundreds of years of tradition,
volume, age.
Is like the years of tradition is definitely present in something like a bottle of Hampden or something. I think I can't remember where I saw it or where I heard it or how true it is, but I think at the zenith of rum distilleries and sugar plantations in the Caribbean, 1700. The Caribbean is an area the size of the state of Western Australia. I used to do presentations. I would relate the size to, so the Caribbean, roughly the size of Western Australia. I think it had close to or over 1,000 rum distilleries, because there would always be a distillery attached to each sugar mill, directly turning that molasses into rum and then sending it down to the docks for mass sale. But yeah, of course, now it's a much smaller number, but I do think they punch above their weight. And with all these distilleries in Australia being younger, I think a lot of them, let's say, are still developing their talent and skill. Although, I mean, I've tasted some distilleries release to release and thought there's been I liked it before, and now there's been a substantial improvement, or they've tried something new and it's worked, or they're trying something new and maybe it hasn't. The Australian rum community is generally, it's a very small group that speak to one another on a Facebook page, but it exists, and everyone likes to try the new things that people are talking about. But there are certainly some beacons of light in the Australian rum world who have just started up, and they've, I think, knocked it out of the park. I mean, that's awesome. Killick, I think Killick is certainly a great example of it, though their style is quite different from what you'll find most Australian distilleries doing. Most Australian distilleries like to play it a bit safer. Killick just were like, nope, we like our Jamaican rums and our funky beer, we're doing it ourselves. And props to them. It worked. It created a unique identity that people around the world are now getting a chance to try. So congratulations them.
So have to back that. I think being willing to take the risk and be different is always something to be proud of. Do you think that the minimum age of 2 years hinders the start of these the progression and the learning of these new distilleries? See, in the UK we don't have a minimum age. It can straight from still, be bottled. Some of them are rested and whatnot. Spiced rum has got its place. Funding the ability to grow, because these distilleries are able to release something unaged or spiced, and that brings in the money. They can then invest that into being able to lay down some casks to age. But if you've got a minimum age before you can really release it as rum, the funding has to be high because you have to be producing 2 years knowing you're making nothing, and then what do you see that as the challenge to overcome?
I would say it's definitely a big challenge. It's a challenge I think I've like observed just walking through bottle shops and seeing what people are buying or what's on the shelves. And a distiller, I'm sure, could paint you a much broader picture because most of what I've seen is from conjecture and my own observations. And the distillers and the marketers are the ones who are seeing the numbers and seeing what sells. So you can sell unaged rum in Australia. You can't call it rum. It's got to be called. People have agreed on calling it cane spirit,
Okay.
which just creates more confusion in buying populations who don't have an education on what rum itself usually is, because rum in Australia for 99% of people is Bundaberg rum. God forbid, or Bundaberg rum and Bacardi, and some spiced things, of course, as well. Captain Morgan's Sailor and Kraken. Like if you ask the average Australian drinker, I mean, I've certainly experienced this with lots of my friends. What's the best rum you've had? They will say Kraken, because it's black, it tastes like rum, and it comes in a sick bottle. Although don't get me wrong, the bottle is
The bottle design is pretty good, isn't it? It's got the two little eyelets. I mean, you know,
amazing. Whoever designed
love
that,
a good. I
props to
love a
them.
good bottle design. Like,
Yeah,
I mean, obviously got the Brugal. It's the only bottle I've got in front of me at the moment. But even like simple bottle, but they put the netting on it, and I'm like, yeah, the sexy little fishnets could do it,
yeah,
100%.
yeah, yeah. And I think that creates just an eye-catching thing. But yeah, with these unaged rums, they, as I say, they have to be called, or they are called cane spirit, and so that creates this distinction to a buyer. Like, well, what's the difference between cane spirit and rum? And people might just skip over
And
it.
just more confusion for the consumer. That category confusion, whether I don't know what I'm drinking, I don't know what I'm buying, and so it's harder to if they like the cane spirit, do they go to rum? If they like rum, do they try cane spirit? And just confusing, isn't it?
Yeah. Exactly. It's like, are these the same things? Are these not? I thought rum had spices in it. I thought rum was sweet. All those things. And I think compounding that is how unaffordable it is just to the regular person. The reason Bundaberg and Bacardi are such ubiquitous brands in Australia is because they're the cheapest options. A bottle of either of them is going to cost you about 40 Australian dollars. Any Australian dollar amount I throw at you, just halve it and you get the quid amount. And so think of buying a Bacardi, a 700ml bottle of Bacardi for 20 quid. How much is it there for you? I mean, I'm not sure.
I want to say like 15,
Um,
maybe cheaper if you get it in a deal.
and because our taxes are the third highest in the world on spirits, they go up twice a year. As of recording, I think it's around $102 Australian dollars per litre of alcohol. Yeah, it's a significant amount.
Wow. That's genuinely
And
terrible for a podcast, but genuinely just rendered me speechless. So just it looked like I'd frozen for a second. It was the cogs turning as I tried to process just how just how challenging it would be to I mean you can see why Australia are a bit behind the curve in terms of like, being behind the trend when you look at some of the barriers like that. That's maddening.
yeah, Uh, yeah, and it means that so many of the brands that people enjoy around the world, like in Europe, UK, United States, are really arrested from not just coming into Australia, but then becoming widespread. And even very simple brands, you'll be able to find Appleton Estate Signature, but finding Appleton Estate 8 or even 12 is a good deal harder to find on just regular bottle shop shelves. I mean, even then, the regular consumer doesn't have the exposure. Looking at rums just above entry level, like let's think Plantation, 3 stars, Original Dark, mixers that are nicer than the standard fare for most people. Those are usually $50 to $60 Australian. And so that just means, well, we're not buying the nicer stuff. Well, that means the people aren't going to sell the nicer stuff to the stores. Well, the importers aren't going to import the nicer stuff to Australia, and the market sort of just Ouroboroses itself in the cost.
So just loads of
Um,
barriers at every stage because the price just
at
feels
every
that
stage, and
little.
and it gets worse. Yeah, it keeps getting worse,
And everyone needs
which is really
everyone needs to
unfortunate.
make money, don't? So
Exactly,
the
at every
brand,
stage
the
along the way.
distillery, and then the importer, the merchant, the shop, the seller, that and So yeah, every stage you're
And then
just making it.
the consumer needs to be able to say, is this thing that I'm spending, more money than I would usually worth my while? And with rum, where they haven't had the experience or exposure to it, they can't say it with certainty. So yeah, it compounds on itself. And then add in the fact that we're in a pseudo recession at the moment. It just means there's an overall downturn in consumption of more luxury products like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Or God forbid the craft distilleries, which are like right now they're releasing their products, and I'm like, this is really great. It's really exciting to see these things coming out, but what's the market for it at the moment?
And that's always going to be the challenge. You have to balance this cost versus the kind of the consumer.
But I have hope. I have hope. I mean, there are lots of distilleries. People were really receptive to the gin boom, albeit gin was by and large cheaper even from craft distilleries. But you know, people are receptive to the whiskey boom. So I want to be optimistic in that respect.
I mean, we see like in the UK, we're seeing like rum overtaking whiskey in sales, and that's been the last few years. I've seen numbers thrown around like the £1 billion like thing and that number, and you're like, this is amazing. Like rum is on this real positive trajectory. I don't know if we're seeing the same boom or if we'll see the same boom that other spirits have had. And this might be a positive. I think it is a positive with this slow burn, where if it just keeps going up, the same way gin did this huge bang, it's up there, and then this kind of downward movement where suddenly bars are being left with too much stock, and they were like, we've got 20 different gins, and people aren't buying them the same way. Like seeing a positive, just this slow increase in rum and more people wanting to talk about it and all of that, it can only be a good thing. It just takes longer to get there.
And I think another big driving factor, not just in Australia but around the world, is that now people are more interested in looking at their hobbies online, like Instagram, your page, my page, or sharing their hobbies online. And that's led, a couple of influencers here and there to really do leaps and bounds of huge work in exposing the category to a lot of people who might not have otherwise been at all interested.
I mean, that's a great point to plug you. So if people want hear what you've got to say a bit more, they want to like get your recommendations, your tasting notes and whatnot, where can people find you?
At RumRumble Official on Instagram.
Wonderful.
That is where you'll find my funny pictures and little reviews.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing more. With like some parting comments to kind of close things up. Let's end on some rums you're excited about. Whether that's like specific bottles or brands, or is there like a trend that you like want to see? Just generally, what do you want to see from rum? What's got you excited at the moment?
Well, there are so many Australian distilleries that, like I told you, came out with something with one or two products and knocked it out of the park. They had something unique, or they had something just that punched well above the expected weight, and seeing what they'll be doing in the future is super exciting. I think the biggest ones I'm holding my breath for, I mean, any further releases from the Killick distillery. They've done 3 properly aged releases now. I can't wait to see the next things that come out because I've loved them all. The Devil's Thumb distillery on the north end of Queensland, so across the entire country. They released one rum, an unaged cane juice rum, and it was just international acclaim out of nowhere, and seeing what that is like after some aging in the super humid tropics up in Cairns is going to be incredible to see. And then there's the projects of Dead Reckoning. I mean, Justin, I've bought, I think, nearly every single one of his products that he's released in Australia. And he's working on 2 really big things at the moment. And this circles back all the way to something I was telling you about with like the friendliness of rum. Justin has put together a blend of super high ester Jamaican marks, which is ultra rare in Australia. We do not have funky rums in Australia. You have to really hunt them down, find them on auction sites, that kind of thing. Okay. They're not on bottle shop shelves. So, I mean, I should say for the record, Dan Murphy's is our biggest bottle shop in Australia. Huge chain of places. If you go to the rum section, 60 to 80% of the section is low quality spiced rums. And then, there's white rums and some sweet and aged rums in between. And then there's a glass cabinet with the premium stuff, which is all super sugared, Dictador, Bumbu, Diplomatico, and sometimes, if you're lucky, El Dorado, but a super overpriced El Dorado. So that's
I'm
what
with
most
you.
people see when they go to a bottle shop.
I mean, I think that sets the expectations as well. I feel like I can't say that because I'm not, my podcast is not old enough to say I'm global. But for my UK listeners and for myself, like that would be what we'd get in supermarkets and and the kind of the corner shop, those kind of ones, as opposed to when we were able, we've obviously got the whiskey exchange, we've got the with the store where you can walk in and see several 100,000 bottles of everything, and we've got
Yeah.
Amathus and bottlers like that that have such a variety, but with a real focus on um, these exciting like non-mainstreams. So that comparison is really interesting.
Yeah. So in Australia, like we do have shops that try and stock whatever nicer things they can get their hands on, but they are ultra specialty things, and most of their money comes from whiskey sales. They're primarily whiskey places, and maybe only a fraction of the staff knows much about the rum that they're selling, but they exist and they do good work of putting actual premium brands out there for people to just see. A whiskey drinker or a wine drinker goes in and says, what's this different thing I'm seeing? But yeah, got off track. To circle back to what Justin's doing, he's got this project where he's blended some super funky Jamaican marks together, really high proof, really catering to the nerd crowd, myself. So I'm super excited for it. And what he's done is he's taken a cask from an Australian rum distillery, Lord Byron. He's filled the rum in Lord Byron casks, and then he sent them to the Devil's Thumb distillery for tropical aging. So it's a huge collaboration between three Australian rum
That's
makers slash
awesome.
partners, and that's just going to turn out. And he's also saved some of those casks down in South Australia where he is, so it's going to be a comparison of a dry aged version versus a tropically aged version, which
I
is
love
going to
that.
be
I think
amazing.
one, gonna do everything I can to get my hands on because it just sounds exciting. But I think that like you've just highlighted basically everything we've spoken about in the last hour or whatever it is. Like this collaborative community, this like such a positive, uh, like just such a positive experience where, um, like you said, you've got three kind of people coming together, three companies coming together to do something. You've got clearly an appetite and a market for it. You've got this, we want to do something different. We don't want to just follow the masses. I just think it's such a nice, I mean, it's a really nice point to end on that that so much positivity can come from the fact that we're going to go, rum is this happy, inclusive spirit that we're just going to come together, enjoy a glass, and have a chat over. And I think that's there's something really special about that.
Yeah, I think that's always been a huge thing for me. Like when people ask me, why rum, why not whiskey, why don't you be normal? And I'm like, whiskey's boring. Whiskey's got boring people and boring associations, I feel like, and I think rum is free of so much of that, which has been such a great part of it. Yeah.
I thought it was just
And
me that got
people
called boring all the time.
yeah, and I think people are always, when you show interest in it, are like receptive to, why are you so interested in this thing I've never tried before?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. There's just so much opportunity, and I'm really I think that's it. Like I'm excited to see what happens with Australia, and the rums there. I think like need to do more of a deep dive, especially looking at Killick, as you said, and that yeah, there's some really exciting things that I'm looking forward to try.
Yeah. I hope they come your way because, as I say, a lot of them don't. They're small release in the domestic market, but things are starting to
I will
eke
do
their
everything
way
I
out
can.
into the world. Yeah.
Gonna try and use the. I don't. I'm gonna be like, look, I'm bigger. I've got a podcast now. I'm officially I'm officially worth sending it to. Let's make it happen. But yeah, I guess on that very egotistical note, that brings us to the end of the show. Chris, Charlie, we're both Rum Rumble. Thank you so much for joining me as my first guest. It's been amazing
An absolute pleasure.
doing this, sitting down and chatting with you. So remind everyone where they can find you if they want to follow, and any
Rum
parting
Rumble
comments.
Official on Instagram. And I mean, keep on drinking rum. Support the distilleries that you like, and try something Australian if you can get your hands on it.
I will drink to that. Cheers.